Teachers are forcing transgender information on young students by using the so-called gender unicorn. Well, what better way to introduce fictional gender identities than with a non-existent creature? I'm Dr. Duke, she's Katie, the gender unicorness, and this is the Dr. Duke Show. Hello everyone, it's back to school week here on the Dr. Duke Show. Many of you have already started your new school years. For those of you who aren't aware, we have an online Judeo-Christian classical school here in Wisconsin called FreedomProject Academy. We have students from all over the world in this online course. In fact, this is our largest enrollment class ever, and our classes start today as well. So here's a shout out to all of our new students, families, teachers, and staff getting things going this week at FPA. So with schooling in mind, today we're going to talk about a Florida math teacher who refused to address a biological male student with female pronouns. Hint, he's already backed down. And now the entire school is undergoing gender-inclusive training. Plus, a study finds 80% of transgender minority students report having serious mental health issues. But we kick things off in California, don't we always, where a transgender middle school science teacher is in hot water after handing out a gender identity sheet without the school's permission to talk about transgender issues. California Middle School, we just mentioned, giving students a handout about sexual identity and sexual attraction. Second-year instructor Luis Davila of Alvarado, who teaches science at Denair Middle School near Modesto, says he gave students the, quote, getting to know each other, unquote, exercise so they could understand why he uses the title Mix, MX, rather than Mr. Remember when they used to put name tags on kids the first day and have them tell a little story about what they did all summer? Well, this clown's idea of getting the kids to warm up for the semester is hitting them with gender information about changing their gender.
And we've seen that gender unicorn many a time. They make it a very cartoonish, clownish looking thing. So look, there's a rainbow that the unicorn is thinking about, because of course that's what all the kids are thinking about too. And so that's supposed to make it welcoming and subtle for them to basically say, you know what, teacher, I don't know that you're a boy or a girl. Clearly, based on gender unicorn, you're in mix.
Yeah, well, take a look at that unicorn right there. Clearly nothing between its legs and a phallus on its head. Is there a better metaphor for the confusion and stupidity of this entire movement?
Well, according to the Modesto Bee, the Denair Unified School District Superintendent Terry Metzger said that the sheet was not an assignment and students were not required to complete it. The gender unicorn graphic comes from the Trans Student Educational Resources. So if mom and dad want to look up the Trans Student Educational Resources, which are being distributed all over the nation in classrooms like Alvarado's and not being caught, they should look it up so they know what's happening in their classroom.
And this is a very important point you make. How many times have we told you just last week, you have no idea, mom and dad, how many non-educational organizations have access to your kids. Planned Parenthood is in the schools. Their curriculum, their handouts, their worksheets are being distributed to your kids in classes like Alvarado's every day, and the superintendents and the principals don't even know it. This is just happening as part of the daily thing. All sorts of LGBTQ, transgender alliance stuff is being given to your kids. Day in and day out, teachers are bringing it in. Guest speakers are coming that you're never notified about. It's being handed down from the administration from the top. None of this is written by educators. It's all written by activist groups, left-wing activist groups.
And this is a perfect example because in Alvarado's class, the only reason it was even found out was the principal, Amanda Silver, happened to be in the classroom. She happened to be there and actually saw the handout and then said, hey, you can't actually hand this out to the children. If she didn't happen to be there that day, what would have happened?
Well, and what does it say about Alvarado? That he's brought this on his own dime. He's decided as a science teacher, he's going to spend time in class talking to them about gender, right? Mm-hmm. Which would, and the degree to which the current argument and discussions about gender are utterly unscientific, it begs the question, why? But he has no shame in doing this when his boss is sitting there. If he actually believes that anytime he wants to, he can insert this garbage into his classroom, even when his principal is sitting there, you know what's going on in classroom after classroom after classroom.
And it's like the story that we reported at the end of this last school year where it happened in Madison, Wisconsin. And it was another science teacher, supposed science teacher, but an elementary science teacher. And he had basically come out to his students, as he said, in a little video.
Mix.
As mix. That's what the new phrase for now is mix.
You can call me Mix Steel, but really, don't worry if you don't get that and you forget and you call me Mr. B. You've known me a long time as that name. That's going to happen. All I ask is that you try to use the new name. And for my pronouns, I'm using they, them, and their.
He decided to come out to his students, didn't tell anyone, and it wasn't until because this video that he ended up showing to all of his classes that it even was made aware. And we have an article talking about how basically, and it's completely true, we are turning our students into little lab rats. That's how we're treating them at this point. I guess that's scientific, right? Using rats in a lab.
I love that. That's a Liberty Counsel who's defending the kids and the families against this kind of wackadoodle stuff. And look, I'm old enough, sad commentary. I'm old enough to remember in the 1970s when the word Ms., right, as opposed to Mrs.
MS, period.
MS was controversial.
Oh, yeah.
Right? But it shows you how far we've come in a short time. Now, Liberty Counsel, this pro bono organization, has obtained copies of internal communications among school managers who attempted overtly to turn the public school into, quote, a laboratory for radical social engineering. Instead of treating students with respect and dignity, the youngsters were treated like lab rats in a social experiment intended to brainwash them with LGBT propaganda.
And instead of, it shouldn't be lab rats, it should be lab rads, R-A-D-S, because that's what they're trying to turn them into.
Or Rad X.
Rad X. Oh, yeah, Rad
There
X.
you go.
We'll put the X in there, exactly. So that's exactly, I mean, this is happening, and again, it's back to school week, and we're all happy. You know, maybe some students are happy to be in the classroom, but know what the teachers are doing to these kids on day one of class.
And unlike the principal in California who was sitting in the school, in the classroom when Alvarado passed this out, this principal apparently thought it was the coolest thing she had ever heard.
It was Madison,
right?
so yes,
It's
it
Madison,
was.
Wisconsin. So way to go, Madison, Wisconsin. You are more ineptly, stupidly woke than even California Modesta schools are. Is that like the new L loser?
No, it's not up here. It's
Is it a W?
Wisconsin. It's a W.
Oh, Wisconsin. Well, it could
You
stand,
are so-
could stand for woke as well.
Yeah, but
right?
Wisconsin.
How
Anyway.
about Wokeconsin? Trademark, the Dr. Duke Show.
I'm moving. All right, let's move on then to a teacher who is actually saying, you know what? This is all nonsense, and I'm not going to obey it. But of course, that means he'll get in trouble. We have a teacher in Florida who is actually not giving into the demands of pronoun usage for a boy who thinks he's a girl. And the results, of course, is that the entire staff, because one teacher says, I'm not going to use the pronoun that you want to be called, now the entire staff will have to go to, sensitivity inclusive training. Thomas I think it's Caggiano. Caggiano. We'll go with Thomas Caggiano is a math teacher at Sandalwood High School in Jacksonville, and he wrote in an email to a student saying, I will not, N-O-T, all caps, refer to you with female pronouns. If this is not acceptable for you, change classes. He also said, I will call you by any reasonable name you like, but the pronouns are not a negotiable thing for me. And this has been a controversial for a couple years now about pronoun usage. Now, the student, of course, notified the principal, Saren Hatcher, who then responded in an email, because that's how they operate in Florida, all emails, saying, thank you for the feedback. Please know that Sandalwood is a child-friendly school. Your wishes will be honored. I will handle this and get back with you.
Yeah, and notice what they'll say on the other side. If this had been a conservative kid complaining about this, there would have been a guarantee in the first email that I will honor your wishes, right? Never would have happened here. So they've already had their mind made up, and it always goes one way. I think the mistake the professor made is why commit that to email? Just don't use the pronouns. You want to call yourself Sheena of the Jungle? I'll call you Sheena. I'm just not going to call you he when you're a she. But why? Well, writing it down in an email like that was probably the problem he got himself into. Just don't use the pronouns.
We'll see what, I mean, he probably still would have gotten in trouble either way at this point.
I can tell you right now categorically. I mean, if you're using somebody's formal name, you are not obligated to do more than that. If I'm using your name and you call yourself Gender Unicornus of the Jungle, and I call you that, that's fine. But if I can avoid using pronouns with you and it's the easiest thing in the world, then I'm going to keep doing it.
That's true, and it was a math class, not like English where you're supposed to learn proper grammar.
But again, notice what happens, right? One kid complains because he doesn't get his way, right? That you have to call. It's not enough for you to recognize my name or whatever I write on or whatever's on the roster. You have to. It's like you got to go out of your way to use my pronouns in ways that the whole class can see it. And that's just ridiculous. It is utterly unnecessary. And of course, why do they keep doing it? Because without even investigating, without even talking to the teacher, without even consulting any of the lawyers, she promised this kid, you're going to get your way.
As Superintendent Dr. Diana Green has shared, we all have an experience of sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression, and we all deserve to feel comfortable expressing those identities. This is coming from the superintendent. That does not sound at all like someone who's an educator in charge of little children.
Math class.
In math class.
In math class, I have a right to express I get to express my sexuality all over your logarithms, right? I'm going to take my divisor into your multiplier in mathematics class, and you better honor. Am I sound like Bobby
You're
Boucher?
like
Have I gone full
Bobby Boucher?
Waterboy?
No,
have I gone full? Mama?
not quite.
Mama?
It sounds like
Why was she using
Mama.
Why is she using the masculine pronouns, Mama?
Mama. Okay, I don't know if Bobby Boucher would have known masculine as a term. Mama, boy terms. Anyway, the district policy does say, and I'm not going to go all over all of them, but there are 4 that talked about how it is gendered. The pronoun usage is, he, she, they, them, zezer, and, they have to follow all this, and you have to. The kids are allowed to wear whatever clothing to express themselves. They can go in whatever bathrooms to express themselves. They get to play on the sports teams to identify with whatever their gender is.
But
so
yes,
clearly,
but when it comes to sitting in math class, we have to honor these preening little peacocks, right? It's not about sitting there and learning your quadratic formulas. I don't know. I'm pulling this math stuff way out of my butt because it's been.
You're good. Quadratic formula. I was impressed.
These are still things, right?
I was impressed with you.
They're things.
Proofs, yeah.
Fine, fair enough. But these little strutting little peacocks have to actually be honored. They have to be foregrounded. This is the thing that is the most obtuse and annoying about this.
Obtuse? Look at you.
It's the second time I use it.
Angle.
Right angle? This is what is so isosceles to me. This is what is so isosceles to me, is the fact, again, that it's not enough to honor me for who I am. It's not enough to allow me to decide for myself. It's not enough, like you said, to cross into bathrooms, cross into sports teams. But you're my math teacher, and you have to do it too. Even though math has nothing to do with this, we're going to make it about math too.
Absolutely. And then you wonder why by the time that kids get to college, we find out that nearly 80%, 4 out of 5 college kids, have mental issues, right? The ones who identify as what they're calling gender minority. So Inside Higher Ed just released results of a study using the Healthy Mind Study. That's an annual online report of student mental health. It's basically the largest one they have and gathered of data to date. They have 65,200 student responses at 71 institutions. So that's, a good swath of the American college electorate here. Now, all this data they gathered was from 2015 to 2017, okay? So they're looking at over a couple-year period here. 2015 to 2017, any big elections maybe happened during that time period? Let's start thinking about things.
Is that about the same time, too, that elementary school teachers started bludgeoning kids with this gender stuff?
About then.
Yeah, that is, right.
Yeah, okay. So the overall report was published in the American Journal of Preventive Medicine under the headline, Gender Minority Mental Health in the U.S., Results of a National Survey on College Campuses. And they found that roughly out of this 65,000, 1,200, or about 2% of the respondents said that they had an alternate gender identity. And they're calling them the gender minority students, okay? So only 2% out of 65,000 students are gender minority students. But within that 1,200 students, almost 80 of them, almost 4 out of 5, have mental issues that they're cisgender, if you want to say. Students do not.
With all due respect to the made-up nonsense that surrounds this issue, the gender confusion is the mental problem. The mental problem is the gender confusion. And I'm not surprised. I'm surprised it's not 100% out instead of 80%.
Yeah.
By definition, this is a problem. And here's the irony. We're whining and wailing and gnashing our teeth that gender-confused kids are also mentally disturbed kids. But here's the kick in the pants. You're not allowed state by state to therapize these kids. You can't take these mentally ill, gender-confused kids and address their mental confusion, which might clear up their mental problems, because that would be, what? Abusive. Yeah. So
that's
on the one hand, we whine about their mental issues, but the one thing you can't address is their mental issues.
And before I get into some of the specific things they talked about, remember that the statistic got me that it's maybe 1,200 students out of 65,200 who were surveyed, 2%. We have been just completely obliterating everything, all common sense, everything has been bowed down to these 2% of college
and what
students.
percent of that 2%
is really
for whom it's just a pose, right?
Exactly.
Or a fashion trend for them. Exactly.
Exactly. Okay, so Sarah Ketchen-Lipson is the lead author, and she's a professor. She said the direction of the findings is not surprising, but the fact that there are these disparities between those kids who are cisgender and identify exactly with what the biology of their makeup is with those gender minority students. She said the disparities and the magnitude of that disparity, as a researcher, it makes you take a step back and run the numbers over and over. So she even looked at it and really dug into this to make sure what they were reporting was accurate, and it is.
But why is this even remarkable? We've known for how many years that transgender confused kids have higher rates of suicide, they have higher mental illness factors going on, they struggle more in school. Why is this news? The only news here is how relatively low the number is.
Well, and that's why I want to focus on that, but because that's where we're putting all of our eggs in that basket for research, because now that we claim that everything in our entire lives, education and culture-wise, has to somehow be tied to your genitalia and what you prefer to do with it, this is what we spend our money on studies for. This is what everything we do.
And this is the consequence of gender unicorns, right?
Unicorns.
You're drawing little colorful cartoons to confuse the crap out of 5 and 6 year olds, right? And then you wonder why they're confused. And those 5 and 6 year olds become 8 and 9 year olds. And they're now being hammered directly in classroom with all sorts of fake data and sensitivity training. And then those kids hit puberty, right, in 9th and 10th grade. And then they've already been primed to be confused. And then when the hormones start kicking in, everything now becomes a mental health crisis. And I am not discounting those that genuinely have alternative mental illnesses. But it, by definition, is up until very recently, has always been a mental health issue. One that when it gets treated tends to go away. Statistic that is absolutely unarguable. About 85% of gender-confused kids aren't gender-confused after they go through puberty a year or so. They're not, which means you've got 80% here of these 1,200 who are mentally ill. I wonder how many of them, if after they got through puberty, well, these are college kids, so theoretically they did. But we know nationwide that if you, A, get them therapy, or B, leave them alone till actual puberty sets in, this situation almost always clarifies itself.
And it'll be interesting to see, because of all the attention that has been given in these past couple years, it's kind of like this grouping of college kids is that, no pun intended, transition phase, so that when you get the kids that are being taught by all the mixes of the world, they will have gone through this confusion and indoctrination early enough that maybe it'll either change, or we'll see, or it'll go the other way. I'm not sure.
Why are you surprised that when you tell kids who are too little to understand, you give kids, little kids, information they are too young to understand? That information, by definition, confuses them based on what they know about themselves and the limited capacity that their minds have developed. And you reinforce those lies. You reinforce that lack of reality from 2nd to 3rd to 8th to 9th grade. Why are we surprised that the mental issues start and stem with the way you're teaching kids? They're not organic to the kids themselves. What the lie about this that bothers me is that this gender confusion is never the responsibility of those who are pushing it on little kids. We ask the question, how come we never saw it 20, 40, 60, 100 years ago? It's because you didn't have elementary school teachers named Mix trying to gender unicorn these little poor kids.
That's what we should just start calling it now. Gender unicorning their little kids. Well, that's going to wrap things up for this episode of the Dr. Duke Show. As always, please share the episode and subscribe to the free audio podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud, and everywhere else. Just visit drdukeshow.com and click on any of the platforms on the top of the screen and subscribe, again, for free.
And that does it for us today. We'll be back tomorrow at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time for another episode of the Dr. Duke Show. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke. She's Katie. And until next time, stay educated, my friends.